the years, we've kind of struggled with how to name this category. It was originally just thriller and then thriller mystery, and then one year they even threw out mystery slash horror slash crime, which is terrible. We eventually settled on a nice concise word, suspense. But regardless of what it's called, we just wanted a catch-all for all of those shows that elicit certain urges. The ones that have you biting your nails, your eyes widening, and your breath being held in rapt anticipation. Here are your nominees for Best Suspense of 2023.
Kama yude no kei wa kama age to mo ii tairyou no abura ga tsukawareta. ブラウ1589
And the jury winner for Suspense is Pluto.
And your public award winner is Heavenly Delusion.
Now, I have to say that these winners are kind of classic our anime awards, I think, where they're both, decidedly good shows. The jury went towards more of this kind of, it feels like just like a jury pick to me. What are your guys' opinions on these winners?
Well, I think Mason is absolutely frothing at the mouth. He was so in love with these two shows. So Mason, take it away.
Yeah, so before I even get into these winners, Suspense is far and away usually my favorite of all the genres that the R-Anime Awards do. From Cyberpunk Edgerunners to Tatami Time Blues to Sunny Boy and Odd Taxi to Doro Hidoro. Usually some of my favorite shows of the year end up in this category. So I was very invested to see where these play. Particularly Heavenly Delusion, which was my favorite anime of last year. So I am both so excited to see the love on the public side and not to see it place even in the top 3 on the jury side. Definitely doesn't raise questions because I can get it. So I'm interested to see Stein's case for, what hurt that show. And just to let me bask in its glory for a bit, to me, what makes a Suspense is kind of 3 components: the build-up and of like an individual scene, the payoff of that scene, and kind of how that continues throughout the whole season. And if you look at a show like, for example, Dark Gathering, that has such a good build-up in each of its scenes of suspense and anticipation, and it has, a little bit of a haha comedy payoff, but it didn't feel to me like it continued a momentum that kept it going throughout the season in the same way that Heavenly Delusion did. And I'm curious, Stein, when you guys were kind of crafting your picks, what elements really elevated Pluto so high and Heavenly Delusion not so much?
So when it comes to things like suspense being the build-up and the payoff, certainly that was one of the things we looked at. But suspense is, as Wilson said earlier, a variety of topics. You're looking for the build-up and payoff. You're looking for the tension that is created through each scene, and you're looking for really just a good mesh of emotion from both the scenery and the characters and what they're going through. Tengoku was this was admittedly a very chaotic discussion between all of us jurors. Tengoku did not get quite as much love, mostly because a lot of us felt that the facility sequences were weaker. And, it's not that the facility sequences were bad, it's just that when you compare an entire half of the show to the tension that was created in the other half of the show, it creates kind of a disconnect between the feelings you're getting from the series itself.
And that's absolutely fair. And as someone who adores it, I would argue that those facility scenes facilitated some of the greatest reveals of the mysteries of the show, whether it be through brilliant framing, musical motifs, or just like sly phrase of words. It kind of fit the puzzle together in a way. But I think the biggest thing to notice is I think the characters in Pluto and the characters in Heavenly Delusion were both some of the best written characters I've seen in anime in recent years. They both felt so grounded, despite the fantastical situation both series presented. The characters really are what were some of the strongest points throughout, and I think that shows.
I'm inclined to agree with you. Pluto and Tengoku are both set deep. They're both in the future, but they're from vastly different futures from each other. And Pluto has the luxury of allowing the characters the depth they need because they're not fighting for their lives continuously. Geist has the ability to go through from country to country and figure out what's causing the robot or the other robots to be taken out, whereas the duo from Tengoku are doing so in between fighting for their lives. So
yeah, and also to go on top of that, Pluto had 8 1-hour episodes, right? And how much did Heavenly Delusion have? Or was Heavenly Delusion 2 core?
It was 13 episodes.
It was 13 episodes.
Okay. So, and I think that gives Pluto a little bit more time to kind of dig into what was going on more than, yeah.
Length did, in fact, play a factor in some of our discussions. It's important to be able to settle on the conclusions you're trying to create for each episode. And by having full 8-hour-long episodes, you have more time to close out each episode on the thought that you're trying to produce.
Quickly, this has been a wonderful discussion about Heavenly Delusion and Pluto. But, there's some big names on here that kind of surprised me. Evidenced by the fact that, you've got Attack on Titan, this beloved series that spans over. I mean, this thing came out in like 2020 something, right? Carolyn, how do you feel about Attack on Titan, and are you aligned more with the public or the jury here?
I'm definitely aligned with the public for multiple reasons. Because, well, as you said, Attack on Titan has been around longer than any of these shows. Okay, Pluto, you can make the case that, well, it's Astro Boy, so it's longer, but you know what I mean. The fact that we have to say the final season, the final chapters, tells you how,
it's been a journey for sure.
Anticipated this has been, as stupid as the naming convention is. But not only have we been held in suspense by the activity in the show, we're also being held in suspense from when the show is actually ending. And how long it's been for one thing, and then just how we never knew what was going to happen, in the next episode, the next series, the next chapter that they ended up calling it. And now that we finally reached the end, I think that gives it a little bit of an unfair advantage, especially in the public eye of opinion. But it definitely feels like the suspense in Attack on Titan, the final season, for at least in my opinion, it deserved to be far higher on the jury side, for multiple of those reasons.
Speaking of public opinion, what do you think about Eren being the antagonist?
I think we all had a little feeling in our hearts that this was going to be the conclusion. Maybe not this specifically, but I think it's very fitting how it ended.
I want to raise a quick question, kind of to everyone as a group, but looking at these 3 shows, Pluto, Heavenly Delusion, and Attack on Titan, they all kind of ride the line of presenting a very pessimistic view of humanity and society and an optimistic view. What do you guys take away? Do you think these shows lean more towards one or the other? And do you think that had any input on, how you would view these shows?
Well, Attack on Titan is definitely the king of pessimism because by the end of the series, even you are like, what was this all for? I think that's kind of the tagline of Attack on Titan once you reach the end of it.
I think what Pluto does better than both of those series, more than anything, is hammer home the feeling that at the end of the day, hatred only begets more hatred. You can see it in every episode, and you can see it in all of Abuela's and ultimately Roosevelt's actions. Is everything is pulled forward by hatred of others. And that underlying tone, though pessimistic, is kind of brought to the forefront and overcome ultimately by Astro Boy, because it is an Astro Boy series. But Geist definitely comes to that conclusion before his ultimate demise.
I think another interesting thing about Pluto is why I would give it good points in Suspense is that it seems easy to give a very foreboding villain, but to see like the result of their goals, like the robot is in shambles with horns in their heads. It sounds simple, but I think that was probably one of the more it's one of the images that's stuck in my mind more than anything else in the show.
Well, it definitely screams Astro Boy, doesn't it?
There's actually another show on this list that I really wanted to talk about, if that's okay.
Please.
Well, and exactly the opposite of my opinions of where Attack on Titan landed on the jury side of things. I am very pleased with how high Miggy and Dally got on the jury side, because even though I have not finished the show yet, because we plan to do a full review of it on a later date, so I'm waiting for then to finish it. I have seen several episodes of Miggy and Dally, and I think that it deserved far more attention than what it got during its season.
That was one that we discussed for quite some time. There was a lot of back and forth on that.
Really? What was it like?
Well, I think a lot of the back and forth comes from basically the first 4 episodes and how different they are from the rest of the show. The first 4 episodes do a job of laying out a comedic feel and letting you get to know the characters. The problem that I personally had with it was that it kind of takes away from the idea that there is an underlying mystery because of just how much focus they've laid towards the comedy.
Mm-hmm.
However, with that in mind, once the suspense starts going, it starts going. And it goes incredibly hard. I know you said that you haven't finished it, Caroline.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through, like maybe an episode or 2 behind that.
Okay, all I can really say is that you are in for quite a delight.
I'm so excited.
There's a reason we put it that high, and a lot of it has to do with how the characters interact and are ultimately shown in the series.
And even then, even before the suspense really hits in the second half, there's something to be said for this like unnatural anatomy, the way the characters move in the light of day in the first half. Even when things are funny, there's just an unnerving sense of unease, the way that these characters around this environment that gives you the heebie-jeebies, that is very effectual despite the comedy elements that are underlying it. So it is effective even before it really starts to hit that second half. So yeah, very interesting.
I think this is probably like, if I could think of a show that defines uncomfortable and with nothing else kind of spoiling that, not spoiling, but nothing else on top of that, Miggy and Dally is uncomfortable, at least from what I've seen. And it's good. It's
In
good.
the best way.
Yeah.
It's a very apt description for it.
It's very interesting you say that, considering how there's almost an equal focus on the comedy. Like you've said, does it balance the suspense and comedy well? I'm not familiar with the show.
I would say it absolutely does. Once it starts going past episode 4, they really find their their pace, and the comedy is never really overbearing, but is mostly there to balance out a lot of the things that are happening. And a lot of it comes in to help you to understand how the characters interact with each other.
That's really great, because a lot of the time I think Suspense can come off as like overly overbearing. Like Attack on Titan, like we said before, is like all this pessimism and it's just like like sadness all the time. I really do think that proper use of comedy can really make the suspense all that much better.
I was going to say, just to shift again, we kind of have two shows here that get into the supernatural mystery side of things between Inspector Season 2, which I thought actually was a better improvement from Season 1. They seem to tighten the screws and just make a much more compelling and mature take on it, and Undead Girl Murder Farce. And I was wondering, Sign, how those two compared in your eyes, because they kind of have a similar conceit, and why you think one was maybe better than the other.
Honestly, that's an incredible question, because you are right, they are very similar in tone. I think that's why they landed so close to each other in the final results. Inspector Season 2, I will start with that, definitely had a lot of improvements over the first season. I feel like the first season was them trying to get a handle on how they wanted to take the series, and then Season 2 was just actually applying all of that to the show itself. So in Season 2 you have things like the Inheritance arc and the Yukiona arc, which focus entirely around separate characters, with Kodako going in and giving her guesses, riling people up, doing what she does. That allowed a lot of improvement on how we saw Kodako as a character. It did a really good job of fleshing out the cast that we are now growing to know and love.
Now, actually, I have a question that I don't know if was touched on before when we were talking about it. Why did Attack on Titan end up so low on your list?
I think a lot of us were underwhelmed by a lot of the things that happened story-wise. We didn't really feel like mostly the stuff with Eren, all of his motivations did not really make sense to us, because at the end of the day, he did definitely genocide a bunch of people.
Oh my god.
Just a little casual genocide there.
We do a
They
little
all
trolling
make this-
around here.
Kind of an extreme reaction
I
to
agree.
something that could have been taken a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it fits the style of Attack on... Don't get me wrong, it fits the style. Because Attack on Titan is, at its foremost, about the inevitability of some decisions we have to make. But when compared to a lot of our other titles, the other titles just they were more complete. We could make more sense of character motivations and the way the setting was going.
Now, it's clear we could sit here and talk all day, but I'm going to leave the audience in some suspense as we cut it short here.
Ooh.
I want to thank you for coming on and having this talk with us. It's been great.
Well, this was really fun. I'm glad we were able to talk about these shows as a whole, because it's been a while since we've been able to look at and dissect them like this.
I can't believe we're already done.
Oh, yeah, it flew by, huh? Well, that's it. We're going to move on. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.